Has anybody seen an angel?
Actually, we don't know, according to St. Paul.
Yeah, we don't know. So the presence of angels are always mysterious. There's certain religions and certain denominations within Christianity that put more emphasis on what is called angelology, or the study of angels, than maybe that this denomination does. There's certain people who are who consider themselves strong Christians and active in their faith, who simply just don't buy the idea of angels. They think that it is a concept that is not useful. I don't know if I agree with that, but it's hard to argue against that in the sense that since they are mysterious, it is hard for us to speak with great knowledge of what angels are and how they are and what they look like and how they act. And while they are mentioned in the scriptures, they're not necessarily given as much print as other things and other people and other ideas are. But I'm going to, before we get started into what the particular study concentrates on, I'm going to give a quick overview of what those who do study angels, focus on angelology, consider to be the basic understanding of how angels fit together, the classes of angels and what purpose they serve. So this is going to be a crash course. It's not going to be terribly detailed, and I'm going to allow the skeptics in our midst. So, there's to believe to be three basic classes or spheres of angels, in which there are supposed to be 9 levels of angels. The top level in the top sphere is a seraphim. This is the most specifically named in the Bible, one of the ones specifically named in the Bible. If you read at the beginning of Isaiah, when he has that vision, his vision is of God on God's throne and the angels, the seraphim surrounding the throne, and they're depicted of having 6 wings, 2 sets of 4 wings, 2 on each side, cover its body, and the other uses to fly. And their sole purpose is to surround the throne of God and offer constant worship. The second in this top tier is a cherubim, and they are considered to be the spirits of wisdom. They are believed to be in partnership with God in the creation of the earth. They do have certain powers that are greater than the other angels. They are more active. They're in the world and in the connection between the world and heaven, though they primarily exist in heaven, than the seraphim, which surrounds the throne of God. And then there are the thrones, and the cherubim are considered to be the dispensers of wisdom. The thrones are, in this top sphere, are the ones that execute the judgments of God over all the universe. They are, in Genesis, you have the story of when Adam and Eve are expelled from the Garden of Eden. There's an angel that prevents them from coming back into the Garden of Eden, and that was believed to be a throne doing that. So when God makes a judgment, it's the thrones that they are in charge of keeping the celestial records and being overall in deciding the proper judgment of things over the universe. The second sphere is more the connection, the interaction between heaven and earth. You have the dominions that are supposed to govern the government. They govern the world. The events of the world are supposed to be under the control of the dominions. So if you believe that God actually brings, and this is where the skeptics come in, if you actually believe that God brings upon judgment through earthquakes or fires or things like that, it would be the dominions that do that. Virtues are considered to be the angels that perform miracles. And they are the muses, or in other religions, like in Greek mythology, they have the muses. Well, this is the Christian counterpart to that. They're supposed to be the angels that inspire. The powers is another class of angels in this second sphere, and they are the ones that are constantly guarding from the influence of the forces of evil. They're the ones that battle the demons that come on, just as Satan has his legions of demons that attack us and tempt us. The powers are the ones that fight against them, that provide us the strength to defend ourselves against the demons. Principalities, they are the angels that provide specific guidance to world leaders. And one can be skeptical about how active they are. And then you have the last two classes, which are probably the most familiar to a lot of us, the archangels. The most notable of those are Michael and Gabriel. They're the ones also, like the principalities, that work on a worldwide sense. They're the ones that bring news of things that will change the world. They're the ones that bring, Gabriel is the one that brings the news of Jesus' birth. Michael is considered to be the warrior angel. For those who believe in the final days with the Armageddon, Michael will be the one that leads the heavenly forces to bring about the Armageddon. Again, there are skeptics as far as how real that is. But for many people within the Christian faith, this is a very real possibility, and this is a future that a lot of them are looking for. My basic opinion of that is be careful what you wish for. And the most common that we are, while the archangels deal on a world sense, guardian angels are assigned to us personally. Not everyone has a guardian angels, but there are a certain class of angels that are tasked with working with individuals to help them and guide them and guard them throughout their lives. So take this for what it is. It's a very interesting and intriguing idea of all these classes of angels working with heaven and earth. A little distinction about understanding about what angels are. Angels are not born, they are created. They do not reproduce. So each angel is created by God. How many angels are there? Well, Jesus talks about legions at his disposal. So those who study angelology say that there are millions upon millions of angels in the heavens. They are not God. They are a class below God. Their sole purpose is to serve God. The distinctions between angels and human beings is that angels have no free will. There comes the question of whether or not, according to certain beliefs, Satan was an angel that fell from heaven because he chose to rebel against God. There is no specific, clear description of that in the Bible. Most of that idea comes from a separate source. Anybody know where that came from? John Milton. Paradise Lost. John Milton talked about the fall of Satan, and that became so accepted that a lot of people grew up thinking that it was biblical. Paradise Lost, so a great piece of work, a wonderful poem, is one man's idea of what happened. It is not specifically biblical. So was Satan a fallen angel? Could be. We don't know. And I am happy with that. Any questions before we move on? Yours is Phil. Wow. You have a name for it. Actually, there are differing opinions. Where do you go to apply for one? I wish I knew. I would get one myself. If I haven't had one already, and if I do have one, I don't listen to it very well, I don't think. Again, we don't know. And that's where I think skeptics sometimes come in, and the value is I think there is a danger too much to ascribe to supernatural powers what are not necessarily supernatural events or supernatural things. I think ascribing too much to angels or demons or to Satan is probably a little dangerous. The phrase, the devil made me do it. Well, no, the devil didn't make you do it. You chose to do it, and you should take responsibility for it. You shouldn't use it as a cop-out. And the similar thing with angels and demons. I think sometimes we ascribe to supernatural powers things that are very practical for us. Sometimes it isn't a guardian angel that is saving us from a certain situation, but sometimes it's our own choices, right choices, and sometimes it's the goodness and the charity and the generosity of someone else, and we should give them the credit. We should acknowledge them. Now, and that's where I think sometimes what happens is the guardian angels, the term guardian angels becomes a little bit opened up, where the angels actually have human form in specific people. We have used that quite often. Oh, she's an angel, or he's an angel. He's been my angel, or she's been my angel, because they have acted in the role of a guardian angel. They have stepped in and provided us guidance or help or sometimes wonderful things without our asking. Now, the question becomes is, did a guardian angel inspire them to do that? Maybe they were inspired by a virtue, right? Or maybe a guardian angel that was assigned to us chose Joe Blow to come in and do this for us. We don't know. It's interesting to ask those questions, but we have to be careful. We have to be careful that we don't forget our own agency in our own lives, right? And our own choices.
I've got a comment.
Okay.
It seems to me, from my standpoint and looking throughout my life, what I hear you saying now is when you pray to God, not for things, but for strength and for help to get through whatever you're going through, good or bad. To me, that's where, if they're messengers from God, then that's where they enter into our lives. I also think, or feel just from this short thing tonight, that I think different ones, everybody may feel the need to give and to help people. It's too bad more people don't. But from what I've heard here, I think that's part of an angel's job, to be there and help us know what we're supposed to do with what we've been taught.
Yeah. And, you know, in the primary definition of angel, the understanding what it is messenger, right? And that goes to especially the Old Testament belief that we cannot hear in full voice God's voice. It's too much for us. It overwhelms us. So God uses messengers. God uses ways of communicating with us that we can understand, that are not too great for us. And that's where angels come in. And angels themselves may not be these heavenly deities that come in visions, but they may indeed be another person who comes to us and speaks to us a word of truth that we need to hear in a particular time. But there is an interaction between, what is understood is that there is an interaction between heaven and earth. There is an interaction between the divine and the human. And that's the basic story of Christmas, right?
I think that also comes, I lost my thought, but it comes with your faith. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's why we develop a faith to believe, whether it's a person or whether it's an unseen angel, there's still a work through our faith and what we do as individuals to deserve that faith, if I might.
And Bob, and that what you're saying is kind of this becomes superfluous understanding. How it comes doesn't matter as much as what it is as being said, right?
Well, you know, in all my medical stuff, I've prayed a lot for strength and the ability to get through whatever I'm going through. And through that prayer, for whatever reason, I start to believe that I'm going to get through it okay, and I'm going to be all right. And the same with family matters or whatever. I think it's a feeling that helps us get through our life, but also doesn't necessarily have to come from God all the time. It comes from individuals. It comes from your faith that you've developed over the years. And maybe that's a simplistic view, but
No, I don't think it's simplistic at all. Yeah, I don't think it's simplistic at all, Bob. So, in 1 Timothy 3:16, there's an interesting statement. So I'll have to... He was revealed in the flesh, vindicated in the spirit, seen by angels. So, in our study that we've been using, what this particular, the creators of the study are focusing on, which is the interesting thing, is not so much a description of angel, but a descriptions of what the angels saw. So in a certain way, what we're going to do through different scriptures and through different eternal principles that they offer is to see kind of the birth of Christ through the angel's point of view. So the first eternal principle we're looking at, and we'll go ahead and look at the first scripture that's connected to that, and that comes from Colossians. By the way, if you want a trick to know how the epistles go, Galatians, past, 1st, 2nd Corinthians is, it's Christian girls eat popcorn. Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians. Something I learned in Sunday school. It's amazing how those things that you learn in Sunday school stay with you. So, Colossians 1:15 through 20. He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For in him all things in heaven and on earth were created, things visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or powers, all things have been created through him and for him. He himself is before all things, and in him all things hold together. He is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning, the firstborn of the dead, so that he might come to have the first place in everything. For in him all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell, and through him God was pleased to reconcile to himself all things, whether on earth or in heaven, by making peace through the blood of his cross. And this statement, along with the prologue to John, is what is the first eternal principle that we understand that the angels saw, and that is that let's get it through there. So the angels saw Christ in heaven. And this is where the understand what the angels, the perspective the angels are coming from, according to our study, is that they're coming from beings that saw Christ in his full glory before he was born. The basic understanding, especially in the prologue of John, is that Christ existed with God in the creation of the earth. That God always existed in three parts: Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Creator, Redeemer, Sustainer. And that the angels, which were the bodies in heaven, saw Christ in heaven before Christ became human. So then, imagine their reaction when they come to the second principle, which is saw Christ in a manger. And here's the next reading, which is Luke 2, 8 through 15. In that region there were shepherds living in the fields, keeping watch over their flock by night. Then an angel of the Lord stood before them, and the glory shone around them, and they were terrified. But the angel said to them, "Do not be afraid, for see, I'm bringing you good news of a great joy for all people. To you born this day in the city of David a Savior, who is Messiah, the Lord. This will be a sign for you. You will find a child wrapped in bands of cloth and lying in a manger." And suddenly there was with the angel a multitude of heavenly hosts, praising God, saying, "Glory to God in the highest heaven, and on earth peace among those whom he favors." What the angels are doing to the shepherds is they're showing their astonishment and their awe. They said, they're essentially saying, do you realize what is going on here? Do you realize the magnitude of what's happening here? God, the Son of God, which resides in heaven, is taking the form of a baby in a manger. So, we get rightfully concentrate on the awe that the shepherds feel, but what dawned on me when I was considering this was the awe that the angels felt, that they experienced, seeing the Christ that they experienced in heaven take the form of a child in a manger, and how truly awesome that event was, because they had already experienced Christ in heaven. Now they are experiencing Christ as a baby. Now, it's hard for us to imagine angels as having the same kind of feelings and emotions that we do, because they're not human. But if they were, you can almost see them as incredulous at the thought. That's worth taking in. In Matthew 4, verse 1 through 11. Then Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. He fasted 40 days and 40 nights, and afterwards he was famished. The tempter came and said to him, "If you are the Son of God, command these stones to become loaves of bread." But he answered, "It is written, one does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God." Then the devil took him to the holy city and placed him on the pinnacle of the temple, saying to him, "If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down, for it is written, He will command His angels concerning you, and on their hands they will bear you up, so that you will not dash your foot against a stone." And Jesus said to him, "Again, it is written, do not put the Lord your God to the test." Again, the devil took him to the very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world in their splendor. And he said to them, "All these I will give you if you will fall down and worship me." And Jesus said to him, "Away with you, Satan, for it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve only Him." Then the devil left him, and suddenly angels came and waited on him. So we have a picture of Jesus going through the temptations that we've read time and time again after fasting for 40 days and for 40 nights. So he's exhausted. He's famished. And after it's all done, the angels come to attend to him. Again, seeing it from their eyes, imagine their reaction to the Son of God in human form being exhausted and being famished. Something that they, if we understand what angels are like, would never experience, because they do not experience what us human beings do. So they're attending to Jesus like he was every other human being. They are seeing Jesus fully in his humanity. Exhausted, drained, famished, weak, tormented, at the end of his rope. And they are caring for him. Something that angels, I suppose, are not used to doing for the Son of God. Now they see, let's read the next part. It is in Luke 22. (39 through 43). He came out and went, as was his custom, to the Mount of Olives, and the disciples followed him. When he reached the place, he said to them, "Pray that you may not come into the time of trial." Then he withdrew from them about a stone's throw, knelt down and prayed, "Father, if you are willing, remove this cup from me, yet not my will, but yours be done." Then an angel from heaven appeared to him and gave him strength. Then an angel from heaven appeared to him and gave him strength. So now again, the angels are attending to Jesus in Jesus' frailty, in his weakness, when he is struggling with the fate that is before him. when he's not so much physically exhausted and famished as he was in the desert, but emotionally distraught and weak. And the angel is coming to him and attending to his emotional wounds. Okay, that one's dried up. Matthew 26. (47 through 54). While he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived. With him was a large crowd with swords and clubs from the chief priests and the elders of the people. Now the betrayer had given them a sign, saying, "The one I will kiss is the man, arrest him." At once he came up to Jesus and said, "Greetings, Rabbi," and kissed him. Jesus said to him, "Friend, do what you are here to do." Then they came and laid hands on Jesus and arrested him. Suddenly one of those with Jesus put his hand on his sword, drew it, and struck the slave of a high priest, cutting off his ear. Then Jesus said to him, "Put your sword back into its place, for all who take the sword will perish by the sword. Do you think that I cannot appeal to my Father, and he will at once send me more than 12 legions of angels? But how then would the scriptures be fulfilled, which say it must happen this way?" The angels were no doubt chomping at the bit to swoop in and show their strength in support of the Son of God. But they were told not to. They were to sit and watch. They were to sit and watch the Son of God die on a cross in pain. They were to sit and watch the Son of God be put in a tomb. They were not allowed to do anything but sit until Easter Day. Then they were the ones who could open the tomb and spread the message. Be messengers of the good news. Kind of an interesting perspective to look at the events of Jesus' life from the perspective of the angels, or what we can imagine the angels might see. Any questions? Complaints? Controversies? Did you do your studying, Annette, to bring up challenges? There you go. Good answer. I like that. Okay.
All right. So, the basic principle is that God is almighty.
Right.
He has power and dominion over everything that there is or was or ever will be. And that includes angels. But if Satan was an angel, there is a question that has to be asked. Is what is out there that we don't know about that makes Satan and whatever else so powerful that God cannot conquer them?
That becomes the question. And that's the question that has plagued the church throughout its history. There is a disconnect that can't absolutely be resolved, reconciled. Part of it is what is called the theodicy question. Theodicy question goes something like this. If his God is all powerful, how can God be all good? Because evil exists in the world. If God is all powerful, then God doesn't allows evil to exist, then God can't be all good. And if God is all good and evil exists in the world, then God can't be all powerful. As long as evil exists, those two can't be reconciled. And that's the basic theodicy question. And just for certain, and for us, for Christians, or for many people of faith, that is somewhat resolved through the idea of free will. The reason why evil exists is God gives us free will, and if we have the will to do good, we also have the will to do evil. Otherwise, our will would not be free. And in that way, that's how an all-powerful God can still be good and allow evil to exist. For many, that is not absolutely acceptable. that still doesn't finish it. That somehow God, that even the allowing of goodwill is a choice to let evil exist. How do you fall on that is really a question of your faith. I can't dictate that to you. Now, that was only part of your question that you were asking, I think. So remind me of your question again, so I kind of got off on that tangent.
Doesn't it presuppose the existence of other gods?
Well, it presupposes, I imagine that it presupposes the existence of the ultimate power of evil. That if not equal to God, at least on par with God. Otherwise, it would not be a threat at all. Now, in early times, there was this group that were a branch off the Gnostics. I think we talked about the Gnostics before. They were called the Manichees. which, interesting enough, the St. Augustine for a while was a Manichae. But they believed that did believe in two gods. Jehovah, or more likely Yahweh, and El. They had another name, but that was the only one I can think of. But they believed that there was a source, a God of good and a God of evil. And the God of good was spiritual, and the God of evil was material. So that's how it was an offspring of the Gnostics. So that everything material was under control of the God of evil, and everything spiritual was control of the God of good. And that ultimately spiritual was going to win, but as long as we existed on earth, there was going to be this constant battle, and there was going to be times where this God of evil, or the matter, was going to be appear to be in control. A lot of the religions, the reason why they are polytheistic or believe in more gods, not monotheistic, of believing only in one God, is precisely because of that question, is of how do you explain these competing forces that seem to have almost equal power. And beginning with Judaism and then moving on into Christianity is the idea of God being in control of all, and even control of the sources of evil. And that those evil forces only have the license that God allows them to have. Like in Job, which is the oldest book in the Old Testament, Satan is only able to plague Job because God allows Satan to. And the word for Satan isn't God, it is the opposer. Right? So it's an opposing force, or it's an opposition to God, which is all good. But even in the Old Testament, you have some polytheistic ideas, because at certain times, God is referred to Lord of all lords, King of all kings, and in some of the Psalms, God is referred to as almost a chairman of the board, or the head of all the gods. The more monotheistic idea wasn't developed until later into the Old Testament. So you see even in early Christianity, they struggled with that idea of how a God can be, how can there just be one God? And I think for the most part, we still struggle with that to a certain extent. The idea of the Trinity is a hard thing to wrap our heads around. How can a God be one, but God be three at the same time? And when you're trying to explain that to someone who is coming to Christianity for the first time and trying to concept, you sometimes can be successful at it and sometimes not successful. And there are some fairly silly ways of explaining it that don't carry very well. They're a little bit oversimplistic. One of them is that, well, you just think of water. It takes three forms: solid, liquid, and gas. So God just is like water. It takes three forms. Well, that's a little bit oversimplistic, right? And then you have the idea that comes out in Proverbs and other places of the idea of Sophia, which means wisdom. And an idea almost develops that there was a partner with God in the creation of the world. A feminine partner, Sophia, that was a source of wisdom. And you find elements of that in the scriptures as well. So I guess I'm going a long way and talking a long time and saying not completely a complete answer to your question. Sorry. Give a preacher, a teacher license, and they'll babble on and on about something and make it feel like they know the answer to the question and just dodge everything. Don't say I'm like a politician, though. I won't accept that. Anything else? This is kind of more, like I said, this is going to be the more or esoteric point of discussion. We're getting a little bit more, less tangible stuff, I guess. More theological, I guess. Anything else?
What time is it?
About 5 till. So I guess it's time to wrap up, huh?
No, the Gospels were written years after Christ.
Right. The first one that was written was believed to be Mark. And the reason why they believe that it was Mark is just most of the scholarship as far as the order goes is what you find in Mark compared to what you find in Matthew and what you find in Luke. That all the things that you find in Mark, you find in Matthew and Luke. And then Matthew is next because all the things that you find in Matthew, you find also in Luke. And then Luke has some things. And then years after that, you have John. And there's reasons behind why John was believed to be written later. And I can't bring them to mind right now. I can get back to you, but I think it has terms with some of there's certain references to events that happened later.
My question is, how could they have known what was in the mind of the angels? They weren't there. They didn't know. Other than...
See, that's the question of the skeptic, right? And it's true, you know. There's no way we can prove that they did. But my answer to that is that I believe that the writers of the scriptures were led by divine inspiration and not dictated what they were going to write, but given certain inspiration and understanding that led them to write what they wrote. And I believe that that was divine intervention. Now, can I prove that? No. That's a question of faith. And that's the leap of faith I'm willing to take. Well, that's a basic tenet of our faith, isn't it, Diane? That it is divine intervention or inspiration. But there are a lot of people who believe that it was just people who wrote that they came to those beliefs on their own. I kind of find it difficult to believe that people in different times and different places, while they didn't write the same story, they centered on similar basic themes that agreed with one another. It's kind of hard to do. And my basic argument of it being a creation, a work of fiction or a hoax is that if it was, the ones who created it would have made it fit together a lot better. They would have made it fit together a lot better. They would have removed all the little contradictions and questions and, okay, it says this here, but it says this here, type of thing. It would have been a lot easier to read. Right? So, yeah, one of the tenets of Christian faith is that the Bible is holy in that it is divinely inspired. What I don't go along with and what is under debate is whether, while we believe it to be infallible and that it's divinely inspired, that it is not inerrant, that it is written through human hands. And so there are places where we can say, okay, is that translation right? Is this the right way to say this? Or did it happen exactly that way? Was the world created in actually 7 24-hour days? Well, no. We have to take some poetic license with the Bible because, first of all, when it was written, before it was written, it was passed down through generations through oral tradition, right? Through stories. Those stories, I believe, also were divinely inspired, but how they came together and later and specifically written in so many words, we have to kind of work with that. And so those who take the Bible too literally quickly run into difficulty, especially with someone who knows the Bible better than they do, which I've seen happen.
Well, the problem I see, to me it's not a problem, but there are parts that you have to take literally, but there are other parts that you can't take literally.
Right. There are things that boggle our imagination and that we can't understand. So does that become a stumbling block to our faith? Or do we find a way to reconcile our faith with those things that we can't bring our minds around? That's the work of faith. And that's the work of wrestling with the scriptures. And wrestling with God and wrestling with God's wisdom is also something we find throughout the Bible. Jacob wrestled all night with an angel, right? Mm-hmm. So it's okay for us to wrestle with those texts that we find hard to understand or hard to believe. And we wrestle with them and we pray about them, and that's part of the work of faith, and that's part of why we do this. I remember being a part of a Bible study at the church I had in California, and we had a member who's leading this Bible study, and he would break us up into groups, and I was just taking part in the Bible study. I wasn't leading it, and so I was in this one group, and there's a woman there and says, well, the Bible is just simple, straightforward. So really only one understanding. It's simple. Oh, really? Okay. Never heard that before. Or, I didn't get it, it wasn't really my place to step in, and because this was led by somebody else, but I would have probably said, I beg to differ. But for her, it was necessary. Which Paul also said is that we are different places in our faith. Sometimes all we can do is drink milk. Sometimes later on, we can take solid food. Depends on where we are. And God meets us where we are. But now I'm over, so I'm going to wrap it up.